This is my housemate's Vessel TV, and it is genuinely one of the worst TVs that I've ever used.
Smearing on even the slightest motion, pathetically poor contrast, having a tendency to freeze and needing to be unplugged from the wall, like on HBB TV apps, YouTube being forced into the ugly performance UI, HDR being their own paper only, and colours that were impossible to get right. The best I could ever get them was with the Dolby Vision setting plugged into the Apple TV 4K, and even then, skin tones were about as yellow as Simpsons characters. Back at my parents' place, while my dad gets a beautiful LG C2 OLED TV, I was stuck with a rubbish old 2015 Sony TV. It's fair to say, I wanted a new TV for a long time, and to own the best of the best, for a price I could afford. And here is what I found, the Hisense U8H, which as of writing this script, can be found for as little as £700, down from the £1,100 MSRP. What do you get for your money? Let's take a look. Keep in mind for this review, I'll be talking about the UK version of this TV, which comes with a VidAs 6 OS and a stand in the middle of the display, as opposed to the American version, which gets Google TV and a leg-based stand, as well as microphones built directly into the TV. If you have a small TV cabinet like I do, this choice of stand is perfect. This type of stand also comes with the advantage of having a plastic shell used for cable routing. The most important ports come off the left side of the TV, with the exception of the legacy USB 2.0, SPDIF and 100 LAN port, which are at the back of the display. We have 4 HDMI ports here, 2 of which are HDMI 2.1 and 1 of which supports EAC for modern soundbars. The other 2 remaining HDMI ports are 2.0, which do not support VRR and 120Hz. Don't worry, I'll get onto that later. We also have a USB 3.0 port for watching back local content or recording terrestrial television, though the TV does also support satellite and cable television. There are a lot of features that this TV provides, so let's go through them one by one. This TV, unlike most others at this price range, featured the new and somewhat expensive mini LED technology. Televisions require backlight to shine through, with the exception of OLED, where each pixel is effectively its own light source. A standard, non-local dimming array television will shine the backlight at all times, which causes blacks to have a murky blue colour. With a high amount of dimming zones, this TV can switch LEDs off in dark parts of the content, causing contrast to be much deeper, like that of an OLED TV. Mini LEDs also try to circumvent another issue with standard local dimming zone TVs, which is blooming. In theory, this TV is supposed to have 336 zones, according to Artings, but from reading online, the UK model has far less, 112 by my count. The dimming zones are the most noticeable in pitch black scenes, with blooming around light sources. Likewise with white text on a fully white background. These are edge cases however, and with regular content, it's not too noticeable. Mind you though, if your content has black bars, the dimming zones are large enough that there will be a tiny bit of light bleed around them. It's not a perfect solution, but having a local dimming array TV as opposed to an OLED has advantages of no burn-in and much higher peak brightnesses, and a cheaper price. Speaking of brightness, Hisense claims this TV can go easily over 1000 nits in brightness, somewhere between 1200 and 1500 depending on who you ask. Most TVs tend to be in the 300 to 500 nits range, so over 1000 nits is more like your phone on the highest brightness setting. While these numbers are at a peak in a small window, as opposed to the entire panel, it does still get extremely bright at the highest backlight setting, genuinely brighter than any TV I've seen before. For example, watching Love is Blind, there are these bright bokeh balls that run across the screen, and they feel like I'm staring directly at a torch. The HDR experience is actually rather similar to that of say an OLED iPhone or a Galaxy S series phone in terms of the highlights popping, and finally being able to translate that experience to the big screen makes me so happy. The second main selling point of this TV is the quantum dot layer, which allows for greater and more accurate reds and greens, with the blues being handled by the LEDs. This technology allows for more vibrant colours and a wider colour gamut, the latter of which, alongside the high brightness, helps a ton with the HDR experience. Playing Sleeping Dogs on my Xbox Series S, a game of auto HDR, driving down the rainy, artificially lit cityscape of Hong Kong, and being inside the bright and beautiful Club Bam Bam, it really dawned on me how beautiful the colours of this TV are. They pop, and not in an over-saturated way, but in a rich and true-to-life sort of way. I can turn up the saturation in the settings to the low 60s before the colours start to look overcooked. Speaking of settings, this TV, alongside the LG, are the first TVs that I've used that look good out of the box and don't require any tweaking. Dolby Vision helps of course, since it seems to tweak white balance and makes things a bit warmer, but really, the only thing that's worth changing is the motion smoothing effect that's on by default in the Dolby Vision IQ setting, with no way to turn it off while leaving IQ on. The clear setting I've found to be the best, smoothing out camera motion while leaving moving subjects alone. While the smooth setting makes everything smooth, it also introduces a lot of artifacting, including during scene changes. Turning on match frame rate on my Apple TV helps somewhat, but it's still not very usable. There's also a black frame insertion option, which while it reduces your brightness, it clears up motion even more, and looks great, though it can't always be enabled. The TV does an incredibly good job at upscaling 720p and 1080p content into 4K. One way that this is done is with the deep learning processing on the MediaTek S900 CPU. Things like hair, skin and patterns on clothes are incredibly sharp, impressively so. It's a bit like Deep Fusion on an iPhone camera. It's not going to be able to do miracles, but it's nice to be a fair distance away from the screen and still be able to see the tiny details in movies and TV shows. Sound-wise, we have a dedicated subwoofer on the back. However, as always, the sound quality leaves a lot to be desired. It's somewhat bassy, sure, but the audio sounds really cheap and inaccurate. A cheap soundbar will go a long way to improving the audio. We also have DTS and Dolby Atmos sound enhancement modes, basically preset EQs with virtual sound widening. The TV, as mentioned previously, has VidAss 6 as the OS. It's a rather basic OS, but that's not a bad thing at all. The OS is fast and responsive, and has every single UK streaming service on there, many of which I can't get on my Apple TV or Xbox. The animations aren't the smoothest, but really that's the only problem I have. All of the third-party apps are HTML5 wrappers, but again, they're responsive. You have a choice of multiple voice assistants that can be activated by the TV remote, including Google Assistant. There's no Google Cast, but you can do Miracast, though it takes an eternity to connect, and despite the Wi-Fi 6 built in, it's blocky and full of artifacts while streaming from my S23 Ultra. Through my laptop, it's not as blocky, but there's still a bit of latency. While there is AirPlay and HomeKit support, and basic Google Home support, there are no apps like Spotify or Apple Music. You can also control the OS via the app. The TV isn't perfect, there are two main issues. In game mode, depending on the resolution and HDR mode, you aren't always able to turn on local dimming. The bigger issue though, was that my first unit had really bad backlight uniformity around the bottom right corner. What's worse is that one of the local dimming zones would never turn off, even in standby. Thankfully, the retailer I bought my TV from, Hughes, arranged a quick replacement with very little questions asked. They're not a sponsor of this video, but I was extremely pleased with how quick and easy sorting out replacement was, even if I did nearly get run over. Another issue that I'm having is when viewing content on Apple TV, color gradients don't have a smooth transition. This seems to be a problem specifically with Apple TV and Dolby Vision.
Look, I realise I said there's two main issues with this TV and I'm talking about the fourth one, but hear me out. This TV has a tendency to randomly reboot, and I don't really know why. For example, once I was just trying to play YouTube from my phone onto the TV, but the TV wouldn't turn on. So I pressed the power button on the remote and it rebooted. Once I was trying to turn on the Apple TV, but the TV was stuck in the terrestrial TV mode, and it was just a black screen, mind you. So I tried to change the input to the Apple TV, it just kept going back to the terrestrial TV. Turned it off, turned it back on, and it rebooted. At the very least, when it does reboot and when you need to reboot it, it takes less than 30 seconds for it to do so, and it's instant to turn on from standby, just like TVs from the likes of Sony and LG. Speaking of standby, there's just a small standby LED and an ambient light sensor underneath the fabric bar of the TV. I'm so happy there's an ambient light sensor here. It worked great on my 2011 Sony Bravia 3D TV, and it works great here too. I realise I haven't spoken about variable refresh rate, so let's talk about it. This TV has AMD FreeSync Premium, which worked great on both my Xbox Series S and on my Asus Ryzen APU based laptop. Though on the PC side of things, not every game actually supports variable refresh rate, so keep that in mind. I don't actually see much of a difference when gaming above 60 FPS, however what is instantly noticeable is the very low latency at 120 FPS gaming. The selling point of variable refresh rate is also to eliminate screen tearing and to reduce frame rate fluctuations, and yeah, I noticed it. Coming to a conclusion has been pretty difficult because of the low amount of dimming zones, which overall spoils the greatness of this TV. What hurts even more is that the LG A2, at the same 55-inch screen size, cannot be bought for as little as £800, just £100 more than the Hisense. It does have its own fair share of compromises though, only a 60Hz screen, of course, no variable refresh rate, and it doesn't get anywhere near as bright. You can get the LG C2, that has a 120Hz screen and variable refresh rate. That does cost over £1,000 however. So yeah, to be fair, I've saved quite a bit of money with the Hisense and I'm really happy with it overall. It has great colours, it gets really bright, it has all the features that I want and all the features that I will need for years and years to come. So I am happy with my purchase, but what I'd say to you guys is have a look around and see if you can get a better deal. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching this video and I hope to see you for the next one.